The iron shackles bit into Ilara's wrists as they dragged her onto the auction platform. She had known this day was coming, from the moment her father died and left nothing but debts, from the moment her stepmother had looked at her with cold, calculating eyes and said, "Well, you're not entirely worthless." Ilara had known she would end up here. The Moonfall Market, the place where desperate families sold what they couldn't afford to keep. The crowd below was a sea of faces, most of them male, most of them hungry in ways that made her skin crawl. She recognized the types: minor lords looking for a pretty omega to warm their beds, merchants who wanted something young and compliant, men whose smiles promised pain. Her stepmother stood at the edge of the platform, counting coins she hadn't even received yet, already calculating what Ilara's body would buy her. "Lot 47, the auctioneer announced, his voice booming across the square. "Female Omega, 19 years of age, healthy, intact, adequately trained in household duties. Starting bid, 500 gold pieces." 500. That was what her life was worth. Less than a good horse. Ilara kept her eyes fixed on the ground, her shoulders hunched, making herself as small as possible. Maybe if she looked pathetic enough, broken enough, the worst of them would lose interest. Maybe she would be bought by someone who only wanted a servant, not a plaything. Maybe, but she didn't believe it. 500 from Lord Ashworth, the auctioneer called. "Do I hear 6? 600. 7. 750. The numbers climbed. Each new bid felt like a nail in her coffin. She risked a glance at the bidders and immediately wished she hadn't. Lord Ashworth was ancient, with spotted hands and yellowed teeth. The merchant beside him was fat and sweating, his eyes crawling over her body like insects. A younger man near the back had a cruel twist to his mouth that reminded her of the boys who had tormented Omegas in her village. No good options, no escape. 1,000 gold pieces. The new voice silenced the crowd. Ilara's head snapped up before she could stop herself. The speaker stood at the very back of the square, half hidden in the shadow of a merchant's awning. She couldn't make out his features clearly, but she could see that he was tall, impossibly tall, and broad-shouldered beneath a dark travelling cloak. 1,000, the auctioneer repeated, audibly surprised. "Do I hear 1,100? Silence. The other bidders exchanged uneasy glances but didn't raise their hands. Whoever this stranger was, his presence had shifted something in the air. The marketplace suddenly felt charged, dangerous, like the moment before a storm broke. 1,000 going once, the auctioneer said. Going twice? 2,000. Lord Ashworth's voice was shrill, defiant. He glared toward the shadowed stranger with obvious hostility. "I won't be outbid by some vagabond." 2,000 gold. The stranger stepped forward, out of the shadows, and Ilara's breath caught in her throat. He was younger than she'd expected, or rather, he had the ageless quality of the ancient Lycans, the ones who had lived for centuries. His face was hard, sharp-featured, handsome in a severe way. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. "The auction is over," the stranger said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words carried across the square with absolute authority, the kind that came from power so vast it didn't need to announce itself. Lord Ashworth sputtered. "You can't just... This is a legal market. There are rules." "The rules," the stranger said, still not looking away from Ilara, "do not apply to me." He reached up and pushed back his cloak. revealing the sigil embroidered on his tunic, a black wolf beneath a silver crown, the royal crest. The crowd went deathly silent. Then, as one, they began to kneel. Ilara stood frozen on the platform, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. The Lycan king, the ruler of the unified territories, the most powerful wolf in existence, was standing in a dusty marketplace in a border town. And he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. "Your Majesty." The auctioneer had gone pale as milk. "We had no idea you were. If we had known." "Remove her shackles." The command was quiet, but it might as well have been a thunderclap. The auctioneer scrambled to obey, fumbling with the key, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit it into the lock. The iron fell away from Ilara's wrists. She rubbed at the raw skin, still unable to move, still unable to breathe. The king crossed the square in long strides, the crowd parting before him like water. He climbed the platform steps and stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were dark grey, those eyes, the colour of storm clouds, and in their depths she saw something that looked almost like recognition. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was different now, softer, meant only for her. "Ilara." It came out as a whisper. "Ilara." He said it like he was tasting the word, learning its shape. "Do you know who I am?" "The Lycan king." "Kaelin." He reached out, slowly, giving her time to flinch away. When she didn't, he brushed his fingers against her cheek, feather light. "My name is Kaelin, and you're coming with me." She should have been terrified. She was being claimed by the most powerful man in the realm, a stranger who had appeared from nowhere and decided she belonged to him. This was not rescue. This was just a different kind of ownership. But when his fingers touched her skin, her wolf did something it had never done before. It settled, like it had been waiting for this moment, like it had finally found home. "Why?" she heard herself ask. "Why me? I'm no one. I'm nothing. Just an omega with debts." "You're my mate." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Ilara stared at him. "That's not possible." And yet, a ghost of a smile crossed his face, the first crack in his severe expression. "Here we are." "Your Majesty!" Her stepmother's voice cut through the moment, shrill and simpering. The woman pushed forward, her earlier coldness replaced with desperate obsequiousness. "Your Majesty, I'm the girl's guardian. If you wish to purchase her, I'm sure we can negotiate a fair." "You put your stepdaughter in chains." Kaelin didn't turn to look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on Ilara's face. "You brought her to be sold like livestock." "She's just an omega, Your Majesty. Her father left so many debts, and I had no choice." "There's always a choice." Now he did turn, and Ilara saw her stepmother shrink back from whatever she saw in his expression. "You chose cruelty. You chose greed. And now you'll live with the consequences." He turned back to Ilara and extended his hand, palm up. An invitation, not a command. "Come with me," he said. "I won't force you. If you want to stay here, I'll leave you gold enough to clear your debts and start a new life. But if you come with me—" He paused, and something vulnerable flickered in those storm-grey eyes. "If you come with me, I swear on my crown and my life that no one will ever put you in chains again." Ilara looked at his hand, looked at the crowd of kneeling townspeople, at her stepmother's furious face, at the auction platform where she had expected her life to end. She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him. didn't know what it meant to be a king's mate. But she knew what waited for her here, and for the first time since her father died, someone was offering her a choice. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and something in her chest cracked open. "Then let's go," she said. "Take me away from here." The king, Kaelan, smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. "As my lady commands," he said. And as he led her off the platform, away from the auction block, away from everything she had feared, Ilara thought, "What have I just done?" She didn't know. She couldn't possibly know. But her wolf was quiet for the first time in years, and her hand was warm in his, and somehow, impossibly, she wasn't afraid. The royal carriage was more comfortable than any bed Ilara had ever slept in. She sat on cushions of deep burgundy velvet, wrapped in a cloak that Kaelan had produced from somewhere, soft wool lined with fur, worth more than everything she had ever owned combined. Through the window, she watched the moonfall market disappear behind them, shrinking until it was just a smudge on the horizon. Gone. All of it. The auction block, the shackles, her stepmother's calculating eyes. Gone. She couldn't quite believe it. Kaelan sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, his posture deceptively relaxed. He hadn't spoken since they'd entered the carriage. Just watched her with those storm-grey eyes, patient, waiting. "You're staring," she said finally. "I'm looking." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Staring is rude. Looking is appreciating." Heat crept into her cheeks despite herself. "I don't understand any of this." "Which part?" "All of it." She pulled the cloak tighter around herself, as if it could shield her from the impossibility of her situation. "Yesterday I was scrubbing floors and dreading today. Now I'm in a royal carriage with the Lycan king, who claims I'm his mate, and I don't—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "I don't understand why." Kaelan leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "What do you know about mate bonds?" "What everyone knows. That some wolves are fated. That when they meet, they recognize each other." She looked away. "That it's rare. That it usually happens between wolves of similar rank." "And you think an omega couldn't be mated to a king?" "I think kings don't buy their mates at slave auctions." "I didn't buy you." His voice sharpened, just slightly. "I would never buy a person. What I did was end the auction before someone else could." "And if I'd said no? If I'd refused to come with you?" "Then I would have given you the gold I promised and walked away." He held her gaze steadily. "It would have been the hardest thing I've ever done. But I would have done it." "Why?" "Because a mate bond isn't ownership. It's recognition. My wolf knows you're mine, and I suspect your wolf knows it too." He paused when she flinched slightly. "But that doesn't give me the right to force you into anything. I would rather spend the rest of my very long life in agony than take away your choice." Ilara didn't know what to say to that. It sounded like pretty words, the kind men used to get what they wanted. But something in his voice, in the careful way he held himself back, made her wonder if he might actually mean it. "Where are we going?" she asked instead. "My castle, Shadowmere. It's about 3 days' travel from here." He settled back against the cushions. "You'll have your own rooms, servants to attend you if you want them. Anything you need, you only have to ask." "And in return?" "Nothing." She laughed, and it came out bitter. "There's always something. No one gives without expecting to receive. Your stepmother taught you that, I imagine. The observation cut closer than she'd expected. She looked down at her hands, still raw from the shackles, still bearing the calluses of years of hard labor. My father was kind, she said quietly. He treated me like I mattered, even though I was just an omega. When he married Helena, I thought— She swallowed. I thought maybe I would have a mother again, someone who would care for me the way he did. But she didn't. She tolerated me while he was alive. After he died, she made it clear that I was nothing but a burden, an extra mouth to feed, an omega with no prospects, taking up space that could be put to better use. The words came out flat, practiced. She had repeated them to herself so many times they had lost their sting. She put me to work in the kitchens, took away my room, and made me sleep with the servants. And when even that wasn't enough, when the debts piled up and the creditors came calling, she sold you. She said it was the only way. Ilara's voice cracked slightly. She said I should be grateful anyone would want me at all. Silence filled the carriage. When she finally looked up, Kaelin's expression had gone terrifyingly blank, the same look she had seen when he confronted her stepmother at the auction. I'm going to destroy her, he said calmly. What? Your stepmother. I'm going to find every debt she owes, call them all in at once, and watch her lose everything she stole from you. He tilted his head slightly. Unless you'd prefer I have her arrested, I could do that too. Selling a citizen into slavery is technically illegal, even if the markets turn a blind eye. Ilara stared at him. You would do that? For me? I would burn down the entire kingdom for you. He said it simply, like it was obvious, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're my mate, Ilara. Your enemies are my enemies. Your pain is my pain. I felt it the moment I saw you on that platform. This rage, this need to protect you, to make everything right. His hands clenched on his knees. I've been alive for 300 years, and I have never felt anything like it. She didn't know how to respond. No one had ever offered to fight for her before. No one had ever looked at her like she was worth fighting for. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be a mate or a queen, or whatever you expect me to become. I'm nobody. I'm an omega who was almost sold to the highest bidder. I can't— Stop. The word was gentle but firm. Kaelin leaned forward again, and this time he reached out, taking her hands in his. His touch was warm, careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. You are not nobody, he said. You are the woman who survived years of cruelty without letting it break her spirit. You are the woman who looked a king in the eye and demanded to know why. You are my mate, and that makes you the most important person in my world. His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. I don't expect you to be anything other than who you are. You don't have to perform, or pretend, or earn your place. You already have it. You've had it since the moment I saw you. Ilara's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry, but a single tear escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek. Kaelin released one of her hands to brush it away. His fingers were impossibly gentle against her skin. You must be tired, he said softly. There's a bed in the back of the carriage. Rest. We have a long journey ahead, and I want you to know. He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. I want you to know that you're safe. With me, you will always be safe. She should argue, should push back, demand more answers, maintain her defenses. Instead, she found herself nodding, She let him guide her to the small, sleeping alcove behind a curtain, let him tuck the cloak around her like she was something precious. Before he withdrew, she caught his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping the auction, for giving me a choice. I don't, I don't trust easily, but I'm trying." His smile was soft, almost tender. "That's all I ask." He left her then, retreating to the other side of the carriage, giving her space. Ilara lay in the darkness, listening to the rhythm of hooves on the road, feeling the gentle sway of the carriage. Her wrists still ached from the shackles. Her heart still raced with uncertainty. But beneath it all, something warm had begun to bloom. A tiny flame of hope she had thought extinguished long ago. She didn't trust it, not yet. But for the first time in years, she wanted to. Shadowmere Castle rose from the mountains like something out of a dark fairy tale. Ilara pressed her face to the carriage window, watching the massive stone structure grow larger as they approached. Towers stretched toward the sky, their peaks lost in swirling mist. Banners bearing the black wolf sigil snapped in the wind. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "It looks like it could swallow me whole," she murmured. Kaelin appeared beside her, following her gaze. "It's intimidating from the outside, but inside it's just a home. My home." He paused. "Our home, if you want it to be." She didn't answer. Couldn't. The word home felt foreign on her tongue, a concept she had lost when her father died. The next few hours passed in a blur. Servants rushed to attend them, their eyes widening when they saw her, this ragged, shackle-scarred Omega on their king's arm. Whispers followed her through the corridors, but Kaelin's presence silenced them before they could become anything more. Her rooms were in the royal wing, not a servant's quarters, not a forgotten corner of the castle. The royal wing, 3 doors down from the king's own chambers. "This is too much," she said, standing in the center of a suite larger than her father's entire house. A fire crackled in the hearth. Fresh flowers sat on every surface. The bed was draped in silk, the color of twilight. "It's not enough." Kaelin stood in the doorway, watching her. "But it's a start." He left her to settle in, and Ilara spent the rest of the day in a daze. Servants brought her food, more food than she could possibly eat. A seamstress arrived to take her measurements for new gowns. A healer examined her wrists, clicking her tongue at the damage and applying a salve that smelled of herbs and honey. By nightfall, Ilara was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She bathed in hot water for the first time in months, scrubbing away the last traces of the auction market. She put on the soft nightgown that had been laid out for her. She climbed into the enormous bed and closed her eyes. The nightmare found her within minutes. She was back on the auction platform, but this time no one came to save her. The bidding went on, faceless men shouting numbers, their hands reaching for her, grabbing at her clothes, her hair, her skin. She screamed, but no sound came out. She fought, but she couldn't move. And through it all, her stepmother watched from the crowd, smiling. "No one wants you," Helena's voice echoed. "No one will ever want you. You're nothing. You're... Ilara!" She woke, gasping, thrashing against hands that held her shoulders. For a terrible moment, she didn't know where she was, didn't know who was touching her. She lashed out, her nails raking across skin. "It's me. It's Kaelin. You're safe." The voice cut through the panic. She blinked, her vision clearing, and found the king kneeling beside her bed. A thin line of blood welled on his cheek where she had scratched him. "Oh, gods!" She scrambled back against the headboard. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I hurt you. It's nothing. He didn't move closer, didn't try to touch her again. Just stayed where he was, his hands raised slightly, palms out. You were screaming. I heard you from my chambers. You shouldn't have come. You're the king. You can't just. I can do whatever I want. I'm the king. A ghost of humor crossed his face, but his eyes remained serious, concerned. Tell me what you need. Do you want me to leave? Stay? I can send for a healer or a servant or. Stay. The word escaped before she could stop it. Please. I don't want to be alone. He nodded and settled into a chair near the bed, the same way he had in the carriage, close enough to reach, far enough to give her space. Do you want to talk about it? She shook her head. Then, surprising herself, she started talking anyway. It was the auction, but worse. There were hands everywhere, and I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And Helena was there, watching, telling me. Her voice broke. Telling me no one would ever want me. That I was nothing. She was wrong. Was she? Ilara pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. Look at me, Kaelin. I'm a mess. I have nightmares. I flinch at shadows. I can't even accept kindness without waiting for the trap. What kind of mate is that? What kind of queen? The kind who survived. Survival isn't strength. Survival is just not dying. No, Kaelin's voice was firm. Survival, when everything has been taken from you, when the people who should have protected you chose to destroy you instead, that is strength. That is extraordinary. He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers. You are extraordinary, Ilara. Not despite what you've been through, but because of how you've carried it. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you're kind, because even when you were terrified at the auction, you didn't beg or plead. You held your head up and refused to let them see you break. I know you're intelligent, because every question you've asked me has cut straight to the heart of things. I know you're brave, because you're sitting here right now, letting me see you vulnerable, instead of hiding behind walls. Her eyes burned. She looked away, blinking hard. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. All the time. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. He rose from the chair and crossed to the bed, moving slowly, giving her time to stop him. When she didn't, he sat on the edge of the mattress, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Bravery is being terrified and still choosing to hope, still choosing to try. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to... You're not broken. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, tilting her head until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. You are not broken, Ilara. You're wounded. There's a difference. Wounds heal. And I will spend every day of my life helping you heal, if you'll let me. She stared at him, this ancient, powerful king who had stopped an auction for her, who had sat through her nightmare, who was looking at her now like she was something precious instead of something damaged. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Because you're my mate. Because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. Because... He stopped, his jaw tightening. Because I spent 300 years alone, convinced that I was meant to rule but never to love. And then I found you, and everything changed. Kaelin, I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. You are wanted, Ilara. You are valued. You are not nothing. You are everything. And if it takes the rest of my life to make you believe that, I will consider it time well spent. She didn't think, didn't plan, just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, barely a brush of contact, but it sent lightning through her veins, made her wolf howl with recognition, made something inside her crack open and bloom. When she pulled back, Kaelin's eyes were wide, his careful control finally shattered. Ilara! Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for wanting me anyway. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath shaky. Always, for as long as you'll have me. They stayed like that as the night deepened, not kissing again, just breathing together. And when Ilara finally fell asleep, her head on his shoulder, his arm warm around her, she realized something that terrified her more than any nightmare. She was falling in love with him, and she had no idea what to do about it. 3 weeks of peace, 3 weeks of healing, 3 weeks of learning what it meant to be wanted. Ilara had begun to believe it might last. She was in the castle gardens when the trouble arrived, sitting on a stone bench with a book in her lap, enjoying the weak winter sunlight. Kaelin had given her free rein of the grounds, and she had discovered a love for the quiet corners, the places where she could breathe without feeling watched. The sound of raised voices from the courtyard made her look up. She rose, leaving the book behind, and followed the noise. As she rounded the corner, her blood turned to ice. Lord Ashworth stood in the centre of the courtyard, flanked by a dozen armed men. His yellowed teeth were bared in a triumphant smile, and beside him, dressed in finery that Ilara's father had paid for, stood Helena. There she is! Her stepmother's voice dripped with false sweetness. There's my poor, confused stepdaughter. Ilara froze. Her body wouldn't move, wouldn't obey. All the progress she had made, all the healing, it crumbled in an instant, replaced by the familiar, suffocating fear. What are you doing here? She managed. Claiming what's mine. Lord Ashworth stepped forward, his eyes crawling over her the same way they had at the auction. You were promised to me, girl. I had the highest legitimate bid before the king interfered. By the laws of the moonful market, you belong to me. The king ended the auction. The king had no right. Ashworth's smile widened. I've brought the matter before the Council of Lords. They've ruled in my favour. The sale was binding, and your protector overstepped his authority. That's a lie. Is it? Helena glided forward, her expression one of practiced concern. Ilara, darling, I know you've been confused. The king swept you away before you could think clearly, but this is for the best. Lord Ashworth will take good care of you. Much better care than some cold castle in the mountains. You sold me. Ilara's voice shook with fury she hadn't known she possessed. You put me in chains and sold me to the highest bidder, and now you're pretending to care. I did what I had to do. Your father left so many debts. My father left enough to live on. You spent it all, on gowns and jewels and parties, while I scrubbed floors and slept with servants. The words poured out, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. You hated me from the moment you married him. You couldn't wait to get rid of me. Helena's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You always were an ungrateful little wretch, just like your mother. Enough. Ashworth grabbed Ilara's arm, his grip bruising. We're leaving. The council has granted me authority to retrieve my property, and I intend to remove your hand from my mate. The voice came from behind them, quiet and deadly. Ashworth spun around, dragging Ilara with him, and found himself face to face with the Lycan king. Kalen stood at the entrance to the courtyard, flanked by his own guards. He was dressed simply, as if he had been interrupted in the middle of something, but there was nothing simple about the power radiating off him. His eyes had gone gold, his wolf pressing against the surface, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely human. "I said," he repeated, each word a promise of violence. "Remove your hand." Ashworth hesitated. His men shifted uneasily behind him, clearly reconsidering their life choices. "Your Majesty." Ashworth tried to summon bravado, but his voice cracked. "The council ruled." "The council has no authority over my mate." Kalen stepped forward, and the temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop. "They cannot grant you ownership of a woman who belongs to no one but herself, and they certainly cannot override the will of their king." "But the law." "I am the law." It was the same thing he had said at the auction, but this time there was no restraint in it. This time, Ilara could see exactly how close he was to losing control. "And the law says that anyone who touches what's mine without permission forfeits their life." Ashworth's grip loosened. Ilara yanked her arm free and stumbled back, putting distance between herself and the man who had tried to claim her. "This isn't over," Ashworth hissed. "The other lords won't stand for this. You can't just—" "Watch me." Kalen's smile was terrifying. "I've ruled this kingdom for 2 centuries. I've crushed rebellions and united territories, and outlived every enemy who ever challenged me. Do you really think I'm afraid of a minor lord with delusions of grandeur?" He turned to his guards. "Escort Lord Ashworth to the dungeon. He can contemplate his choices while I decide whether to have him executed for treason or merely stripped of his lands." The guards moved to comply. Ashworth sputtered protests, but he was outnumbered and outmatched, and within moments he was being dragged away. That left Helena. Ilara's stepmother stood alone in the courtyard, her earlier confidence evaporating. She looked between Ilara and Kalen, clearly calculating her odds. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice honeyed again, "surely you can understand. I was only trying to help my stepdaughter. Lord Ashworth assured me—" "You sold her." Kalen's voice was flat. "You took a grieving girl, worked her like a slave, and then put her in chains when she was no longer useful. There is no explanation that makes that acceptable. She's just an Omega. She is my mate, and your future queen." He stepped closer to Helena, and for the first time, genuine fear flickered in the woman's eyes. "And you will address her with the respect she deserves? Or you will join Lord Ashworth in my dungeons?" Helena's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "Kalen?" Ilara's voice was steadier than she expected. She moved to stand beside him, and when his hand found hers, she held on tight. "Let her go." He turned to look at her, surprise in his eyes. "After everything she did—" "I don't want her in our dungeons. I don't want her anywhere near our lives." She met Helena's gaze and felt something shift inside her. The last remnants of the scared, powerless girl she had been falling away. "Go back to your empty house and your worthless creditors. Live with the knowledge that the stepdaughter you despised is now more powerful than you could ever dream of being. That's punishment enough." Helena's face contorted with rage, but she was smart enough to recognize defeat when she saw it. "You'll regret this," she spat. "Both of you." "I doubt it." Ilara smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "Goodbye, Helena. I hope I never see you again." The guards escorted her stepmother out. The courtyard fell silent. And then Kalen was pulling her into his arms, crushing her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. "I thought I'd lost you," he breathed. "When I heard they were here, when I saw him touching you." "You didn't lose me." She pulled back enough to look at him, her hands framing his face. "You saved me. Again. You saved yourself, the way you stood up to her. I couldn't have done that without you, without knowing you were behind me." She took a breath, her heart pounding. "I love you, Kalen. I think I've loved you since you took that wine pitcher out of my hands and—" She stopped, laughing at herself. "Wait, no, that wasn't us. That was— I know what you mean." He was smiling now, that rare, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "And I love you too. I've loved you since the moment I saw you. I'll love you until the stars burn out." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't brief. It wasn't tentative. It was a claiming, a promise, a beginning. And Ilara kissed him back with everything she had, finally ready to believe in her own happiness. The throne room of Shadowmere had been transformed. Thousands of candles flickered from every surface, their light reflecting off silver decorations that hung from the vaulted ceiling. White flowers cascaded down the stone pillars, winter roses, rare and precious, blooming despite the cold. And at the end of the long aisle, beneath an arch woven with evergreen and moonflowers, stood the Lycan king, waiting for her. Ilara paused at the entrance, her hand trembling on the arm of the elderly lord who had volunteered to escort her. She had no family left to give her away, no one who deserved that honor. But Kalen's advisors had stepped forward, one after another, offering to stand in her father's place. She had chosen Lord Brennan, the oldest among them, who had lost his own daughter decades ago, and looked at Ilara with something like paternal pride. "Ready?" he asked softly. She looked down the aisle at Kalen. He was dressed in ceremonial black, a silver crown on his dark hair, but his eyes held the same warmth they always did when he looked at her. The same wonder, the same love. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The music swelled, and she walked toward her future. The ceremony was a blur of ancient words and sacred vows. She remembered fragments, Kalen's voice, steady and sure, promising to honor her, protect her, cherish her for all his days. Her own voice, stronger than she had expected, making the same promises in return. The way his hands shook slightly when he slid the ring onto her finger, as if he still couldn't quite believe this was real. And then came the marking. Kalen cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Are you sure?" he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Once this is done, it can't be undone. You'll be bound to me forever." Forever sounds perfect. He smiled, that rare, radiant smile that was hers alone, and lowered his head to the curve of her neck. The bite was sharp, a flash of pain that melted almost instantly into something else. Warmth flooded through her, and with it came Kalen, his presence filling her mind, his emotions tangling with hers. She felt his love, vast and ancient and utterly devoted. She felt his joy, so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. She felt his relief, as if he had spent 3 centuries holding his breath and could finally exhale. She bit him back, marking him as hers, claiming him the way he had claimed her. When they pulled apart, the bond hummed between them like a living thing. He pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing hard. "My queen," he whispered. "My king," she answered. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Ilara barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her husband. The feast that followed was the grandest the kingdom had ever seen. Nobles from every territory had come to witness the union, to see for themselves the Omega who had captured the Lycan king's heart. Ilara sat beside Kaelin at the high table, wearing a crown that matched his, and marvelled at how far she had come. 3 months ago, she had been property, a lot number, something to be sold. Now she was queen. It was near midnight when the herald announced unexpected guests. The doors swung open, and a bedraggled group stumbled into the hall. At their head, her fine gown torn and muddy, her hair dishevelled, was Helena. The hall fell silent. Ilara rose slowly, her hand finding Kaelin's. He stood beside her, a wall of warmth and strength at her back. Helena. She kept her voice calm, though her heart raced. I thought I told you I never wanted to see you again. You have to help me. Helena's voice was ragged, desperate. All her former poise had crumbled. They took everything. The creditors came and they took the house, the jewels, all of it. Lord Ashworth's allies turned on me when he was imprisoned. I have nothing left. And you came here expecting… what? Mercy? You're queen now. You have power. You could… I could what? Ilara descended from the dais, each step measured and deliberate. I could save you? The way you saved me when I was orphaned and alone? The way you protected me when the creditors first came calling? She stopped a few feet from her stepmother, close enough to see the fear in the woman's eyes. You taught me something, Helena. You taught me that family isn't blood, it's choice. And I choose to remember exactly how you treated me. Ilara, please. You called me worthless. You said no one would ever want me. Ilara smiled, and it was cold as winter frost. Look around you. Look at this hall, these people, this crown on my head. Tell me again how worthless I am. Helena's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked almost human, broken and afraid and desperate. Ilara felt nothing. Guards, she said quietly. Escort my stepmother to the border. Give her enough coin to survive the week, and make sure she understands that if she ever sets foot in this kingdom again, she will be arrested for her crimes against the crown. Helena was dragged away, screaming protests that echoed off the stone walls. The nobles watched in fascinated silence, already composing the stories they would tell for years to come. The cruel stepmother who sold the future queen. The Omega who rose from chains to wear a crown. The justice that came, in the end, for those who deserved it. When the doors closed behind Helena, Kaelin pulled Ilara into his arms. That was magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I learned from the best. 2 years later, Ilara stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun set over the mountains. So much had changed. Lord Ashworth had been stripped of his lands and titles, his fortune redistributed to the Omegas he had wronged over the years. The Moonfall market had been shut down permanently, slave auctions outlawed throughout the unified territories. Helena had last been seen begging for scraps in a distant kingdom, her beauty faded, her schemes exhausted. And Ilara, the girl who had once been Lot 47, was pregnant with the royal heir. Kaelin's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands settling on the gentle swell of her belly. She leaned back into his warmth, feeling the steady pulse of the mate bond between them. Happy? He asked. Deliriously. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I love you, you know. More today than yesterday. More tomorrow than today. I know. She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she had grown to love more than she had ever thought possible. I love you too. Thank you for stopping that auction. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. You were the easiest thing I've ever seen." He kissed her softly. "The moment I looked at you, I knew. You were never meant for chains and auction blocks. You were meant for crowns and thrones and me." She laughed, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. "That's very romantic." "I'm a very romantic king." "You're ridiculous." "Only for you." They stood together as the last light faded, wrapped in each other, bound by a love that had begun in the most unlikely of places and grown into something unshakable. The girl who had been sold to the highest bidder had found something that couldn't be bought: a home, a family, a love that would last forever, and she would never let anyone take it from her again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more Lycan King romances. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and let us know in the comments, what tropes do you want to see next?